All right, what's up, my peeps? Joshua Smithy with another GSD Mode Health and Fitness podcast. As always, joined by Jim Brown, my personal health and fitness mentor, business partner, good friend. Jim, welcome back, brother.
Thanks, man. How's it going?
Doing awesome, man. It's always love being able to jam with you on these the couple times a month that we get to, and really
Yep.
excited to do a deep dive into the topic that we're covering here today with Retatrutide. Before we do so, though, I just want to remind everybody that's watching and listening to make sure to check out forgelife.com, FORJLIFE.com. That's where Jim's brilliant nootropic that he built out, that he designed. This is the most powerful nootropic. And this isn't me giving you guys a sales pitch, man. I'm a dude that's tested every nootropic out there, man. I take 2 servings every single day. So if you are looking for just more mental focus, more mental energy, reduce eye strain, when we're behind our devices all day, telling you guys, man, this product is a game changer. I can't even fathom life without it anymore. So if you guys want to check that out, go to Forge, FORJ life.com, snag a bottle. I promise you'll not be disappointed. All right, so man, we're here to talk about Retatrutide. I finally was
Yeah.
able to pronounce it correctly.
I know, man. I'm going to slaughter all of you today, I'm sure. But yeah, just a quick history lesson of my usage, right? We started talking about this, what, 6, 8 months ago. We started using it and, kind of run you through a little bit of the history of these. I've tried four of them or five of them now, and kind of give you my opinion on all of those. But basically, these are all GLP-1 drugs, or they're kind of all in that category. Some of them aren't approved by the FDA for use yet, but they're available on research sites where I get all my stuff. We go through one company, and he's actually a guy who was, one of the guys and had this idea. Well, shit, I'm going to start selling peptides, and he's been super meticulous about getting the certificate of analysis of every batch and everything. There was recently a bigger peptide company, Peptide Sciences, that sold a batch of retatrutide and got it out to people, and didn't contain any retatrutide. And they've been around for a long time. They're a big name, but things happen. I don't know if they didn't order a third party analysis or whatever. But anyway, that being said, we have a really good source for it. We'll share with you guys. And just a kind of a quick history lesson. About 2010-ish, there was something called liraglutide, which was kind of the precursor to semaglutide. I remember semaglutide was kind of available on the black market, maybe 2012, 2013. And as I shared before, I had a guy approach us and wanted us to be involved with that. And I tried it, and it just crushed my appetite. And at the time, I didn't see it. I didn't see what a how valuable of a tool could this could be, because I'm a bodybuilder. So hey Josh, this from the last time you were dieting and trying to get all this food in. I mean, there really is a struggle of trying to eat enough meat and carbs to fuel your body, especially when you're really hammering away and you're lean and your body's working right. It's a chore already. So why would I take something that wiped that out, right? It just didn't make any sense to me. However, now I see the light. And fast forward to a couple years, maybe a year and a half ago, I had a client, real heavy. We've tried back and forth over the years to try to get him, motivated enough, or what I call it is to have that flip of the switch internally, where it's like, okay, I've had enough of it. I'm going to do whatever now. I'll eat on plan. I'll walk after every meal, whatever it takes, I'll do it. And you really can't talk somebody into that. If they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And so we had been going back and forth for months, and I think actually we've talked for a couple of years, and he would start and then he'd stop, and he's just one of those guys that it didn't click for him yet, so he wasn't going to do it. He had reached out and said, "Hey, I'm going to get a prescription for Ozempic. Have you ever used it? What do you think about it?" And Ozempic, if you don't know, is the patented form of semaglutide. And so what these drug companies did is take these peptides, and they created a special delivery system and a dosage, and then they have a name like Ozempic, Wegovy, whatever. But we're going to be talking about those, in their raw forms of the peptide today. But anyway, so I tried semaglutide again, And absolutely, I took the recommended dose to start, which is 2 milligrams, and it absolutely crushed my appetite. Like I couldn't eat. I was a little nauseous if I really put out physically, and it was difficult. It was very difficult to eat enough. However, if you go from eating 3,200 calories a day to 1,000, and you're working out and you have the history that I do with my body, responded pretty well. I mean, I started dropping body fat really fast. And so, I think that first time for about 6 weeks, I dropped probably 8 pounds of fat, which was, I was fat to begin with, and went off of it and kind of, came up with some ideas to experiment with and what else to try. But, um, I felt comfortable having this client, guys, give him my thoughts, and he made the decision to try it. Um, and then fast forward to that's why I came up with this little guide that I wrote, and kind of some outlines how to use it. And basically, it was, if you're going to take something like a semaglutide or any of these GLP-1s, it's going to crush your appetite. And so, what do you do in the absence of hunger? Well, you just don't want to starve yourself and not eat. So you want to eat on plan. And what does on plan look like? Well, just as a rough guide, it's 3 or 4 meals a day, high protein, some carbohydrates, a little bit fat. Just like you were a bodybuilder. I mean, that's the way to do it. Um, you've all seen and heard a lot of the people that go on Ozempic or whatever, they all end up skinny fat. And that's why, because they don't eat enough. When they do eat, it's not protein. They're not working out. They're not doing anything physically active. And, a lot of these now, everybody's on it. And, I met a lady the other week and we were talking about it in this dinner, and, just the food choices that she was making. I was like, what? Didn't anybody talk to you at all about this? I mean, you go all day and then have, like a fruit smoothie and a piece of cake. That's what you fucking ate for the day. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't, it doesn't work, man. So anyway, my client did really well. He lost about 200 pounds overall. A little bit of that was muscle, but I would think mostly fat. And, fast forward today, he's off the GLP-1s and he maintained that lifestyle. So I really think the best way to use these is for short term. And I'm trying to experiment longer term to see, what that kind of looks like. But, if you can get into a habitual style of eating and you're going to eat these types of foods, you're going to eat them 3 or 4 meals a day, and that's what you're going to pack your food. You're going to prep your food. That's what you want. You want to get in that habit before you go off of these drugs and your hunger comes back. And I think that's where the real gift is. Now, Retatrutide does something else that's a little bit different that we'll talk about. But anyway, in a nutshell, that's kind of where, Ozempic semaglutide was, where everybody, when was it, Josh? It was about 2 years ago now that everybody's starting, it's becoming a household name. And by now, um, you can mention it in any type of crowd, and there's people, if they're going to admit it, they're on it. It's super widespread. So anyway, hopefully after this, you guys will have a little bit better idea of what it is, how to use it right. I don't think though that you can get away with certain things, but ultimately you want to still eat high protein meals, and you still want to work out, or if you're not working out, do at least some type of resistance training. And I feel it's imperative to walk after meals, and if you do that, you can maintain some of the muscle that you have on and lose a shitload of body fat. And so for that, I think it's a really good tool. So fast forward, there was tira, tirzepatide was the next kind of iteration of semaglutide that came out. Um, very similar. I tried that. I didn't think it did a lot. I didn't really notice that it was more powerful or did anything. So then a couple months after that, Retatrutide is what came out. Um, Now, if we kind of look at the differences, um, no, they all work on specific mechanisms. Semaglutide was a GLP-1 only. Tirzepatide is a GLP and a GIP. We'll get into what that is. Mazatrutide, which has just come out, is a GLP-1 plus a glucagon a glucagon agent. And then Retatrutide has all three of those. It's a GLP-1, it's a GIP, and a glucagon effect. So As you see these kind of advance, I think Retatrutide is the most advanced version of what we have now. It has three different mechanisms. And one of the things that Retatrutide does that the others don't is something kind of magical where, man, if you have body fat on you and you're taking Retatrutide, you will not feel unenergized. It helps your body break down the fats more efficiently and use for fuel. And I think that's a little bit independent of all the other ones that I've tried, the Mazatrutide. I can't pronounce any of these. It's probably one of the newer ones out, but it's not as effective, I don't think, as Retatrutide. So Retatrutide gives you more energy, and you don't notice that even if you're only eating 900 calories a day, you really don't notice it because you're getting it's so fast to convert energy from body fat to short chain keto. I mean, you go into short chain aminos, short chain fatty acids, and glucose with that, but it's really powerful. And so that's probably the newest, baddest one that's out there. Um, again, all the strategies are kind of the same. What the big thing for me was then, okay, what do I do with these? How do I stay lean year round? Can I use them year round? And that was kind of what, the bodybuilder guys were thinking, like, how do we use this to our advantage? And the last 6, 8 months or so, I've been trying to figure out what a low dose, consistent use of that is. And I'm looking for just a little bit of appetite suppression, but not some of the side effects that are usually following a dose that makes you really not hungry at all. So the side effects or some of the issues that all of those contained, it slows down gastric emptying. So food will stay in your stomach longer, and it does, it slows down your digestion. That's not good if you're a 260-pound guy and you're trying to eat 2,700 to 3,000 calories from food a day. And so I would always have heartburn, go to bed with heartburn, and it became a real problem. Um, and so there were some strategies that went along with that, more liquid nutrition, that kind of stuff to get over it. But if you back off enough and just, I really wanted to find a sweet spot where it would just curb my appetite a little bit and not affect my, the digestion as much. Because one of the things about holding on to significant amounts of muscle and trying to stay lean is you have to push nutrients through. Your body is literally a machine where you're feeding it protein, carbs, and you're trying to get as much of them through as possible without putting on body fat. And that's how you support muscle growth. That's how you have enough energy to train. But that also comes with a lot of hunger too, because there's those issues. So anyway, what me and a lot of other guys are doing are trying to experiment what this low dose looks like, and typically it's about a half or the original starting dose, 1 milligram to 2 grams a week. You build a tolerance to this stuff really fast. So the first time you take it, 2 milligrams will crush your appetite, and that lasts for maybe 4 or 5 weeks. And then you're starting to have to add on to keep that same feeling. Your body becomes very accustomed to that dose. And within 3 months, you're taking, 10 grams at a time. However, with that kind of strategy that I just laid out, it seems like 1 to 2 milligrams a week is enough just to curb appetite, give you a little break on that, and then not affect anything else negatively. There's one of the other things that I noticed too with the Retatrutide is it kind of it interfered with me reglycogenating my muscles. And so, as you guys know, as we've talked about this cyclic diet before and how important I think it is to have muscle glycogen when you train for recovery and for energy. And, usually when I'm doing that, we have high carb days to do that and fill up once a week and then kind of train and eat lower carb and train until you're flat again or out of muscle glycogen. And then you repeat that cycle. With the Retatrutide, it, it made it real difficult to do that, even with high amounts of carbs. And so I try to combat that with eating more carbs throughout the day, to try to keep them more full and not have that total empty tank to try to refill. And it wasn't successful. And so that was another one of the things that really kind of, hampered me is like, yeah, you can't stay on this stuff that long. You're going to lose, even me, you're going to lose muscle. And so anyway, back to, trying to find this happy medium where you're kind of curbing appetite, but not affecting everything else. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, it sounds like, where these are becoming so powerful is like, if you kind of go down the history of, the experts trying to help with this, you know, body fat, adipose tissue epidemic that we're in. So okay, they started off with, okay, let's figure out how to try to increase metabolism. Well, that didn't work. Let's try to get people to eat cleaner. Well, that kind of didn't work either, right? But with this,
yeah.
because this really focuses on hunger drive, that seems to be the kind of the key factor of just lowering people's hunger drive. But like you said, the mistake that, I don't know, I mean, what your experience is, but it seems to be like 90% of the people that I know that are on any of these GLP ones or variations of them, like you said, they just starve themselves. Their bodies go catabolic. So yeah, they're losing a bunch of weight. But then it's like, man, I don't even know on the other side of this what those other health implications are going to be. Cause it's like one of the most important elements as we age to longevity is having healthy amounts of skeletal muscle, right? So then
Right.
they start, I'm like, oh man, I mean, I love it. These are such powerful, amazing tools, but powerful, amazing tools used in the wrong way. It's like, what are those negative consequences going to be for so many of these people?
Well, I use this analogy a lot on Twitter, but a screwdriver is a great tool unless you stick it up your ass, and then it's not such a great tool.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't work so good, or maybe it does. I don't know, but and these are very powerful drugs, man. These are very powerful drugs, and like you said, I've seen some very good stories with it. Some of my own clients where it's just got enough to get the ball rolling. They get some momentum, they lose some fat, and then when they come off of these, they built a habitual style that, hey, this is my new lifestyle. I pack my food, or I go to Chipotle and I get the salad with the chicken breast and that's it, or whatever. You build those habits up. I walk 5 minutes after dinner. Those things are the ones that are going to keep you, having some muscle on, significant, not significant, but you'll keep some muscle, preserve some muscle on the way down, and then you got to get off these drugs. And then when you get off of them, you have to keep up what you built, the last 6, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 3 months building is I prep my food. This is what I eat every day. I eat very simple foods. And if you don't do that, then it's going to be a mess. You're going to starve yourself. You're going to lose more muscle. You're going to end up skinny fat. And then when you get off of them, you're going to be worse off.
Yeah.
So just like anything, man, it's a powerful tool, but if used correctly, it's amazing. If used incorrectly, you're gonna pay for it. That's it. So really, the best, all of these things they do slightly different things. Retatrutide is probably the most powerful one to date. I don't know if it'll be FDA approved. It probably will be soon. It's available on the underground. Peptide companies are selling them. And that's probably my top recommendation if you're trying to lose, a significant amount of body fat, or if you're in that kind of crew where you're just trying to get a little bit of fat off. You already know how to eat, you know how to diet, you know how to exercise, and you need some help. Retatrutide could be a choice for you, or Mazdutide is probably a better one, just because the digestion part isn't as strong as a retatrutide. It doesn't slow down your digestion as strong as retatrutide does. And I think it's better if you're just looking for a little bit of something to curb the appetite, and then you already know what to do. You know that you're going to pack your food. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You just know how to do it. You just want a little help killing the appetite. But that being said, all of these, same thing, man. You can't starve yourself, and it's not a license to not eat all day and then have cake at night. You really have to think like a bodybuilder, and this is something that I alluded to in that little guide that I wrote. It was like, my definition of a bodybuilder is you looking in the mirror and seeing your body and thinking, I don't want that. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to lose some weight around my waist. It could be adding muscle, but you wanting to change or create something, a different look with your body, then you're a bodybuilder. And the only way, I don't care what your goals are, the only way to get there is high protein, carbohydrates, and probably low fat. If you want to have any type of muscle or preserve any type of muscle and be healthy, that's the road to do it.
Yeah.
And training, truly believe you have to do some type of weight bearing exercise with weights to justify and keep bone mass and any type of muscle on your body. You're going to have to use it or your body's going to get rid of it. And then, the rest is you don't have to do massive cardio, but I'm suggesting you walk 5 minutes after every meal. And if you do that, I think it's super powerful tool. I think they're safe to use that way. Of course, I'm not trying to talk you into these. That's something that you have to decide on your own. But a lot of the people who use these and hit the wall and are, very catastrophic results, I think they're on that massive dose where they don't want to feel anything hunger related. They're on that dose for months and months and months. And when you first go on it, like I said, most people will start at 1.5 or 2 milligrams, no matter the analog of these. And by the time, if you want to keep that same feeling, by the time you're at months 3 or 4, you're taking 10 grams a week. So it really doses up. So I can't imagine, if you're somebody, you could be taking 20, 30 grams a week. I don't know. So that's probably not a good idea. Where you can't eat and your digestion's so fucked up and all that. That's where I think people are getting these massive, catastrophic side effects and blowouts. But um, I could
Yeah.
be.
So then in from like Retatrutide versus like, Ozempic. Because I think I remember when you mentioned like when you were on Ozempic, like you were almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I heard this from somebody else, but you were having to take like anti-nausea medication when you
I
were just
probably
trying to
should have.
force feed yourself. Okay.
Yeah, I probably should have. But yeah, I felt pukey. And actually, when I first started with that big dose, I was a little depressed too.
Really?
And yeah, yeah. So that one hit me really hard for sure. And again, it just speaks to these are very powerful drugs. I'm no stranger to drugs, and for me to be affected like that, it just tells me it's really strong. But yeah, typically if you go to a clinic or something like that, they'll write you a script for Zofran it's an anti-nausea medication to take because if you're taking a full dose like that, you're probably going to be nauseous. Um, and it's when you're nauseous like that, and then everything else you don't want to eat. You just don't. Last thing you want to eat is fucking chicken breast. I can tell you that much. But that's the thing that you have to eat. But again, thank God for the Ninja smoothie, the Ninja creamy, and all those things. Where you can get 100 grams of protein and a quart of ice cream. But it's they're super powerful, super effective, and I just if people out there are going to use them, just use the tool correctly, and if you do, it's a very powerful tool.
So then with Retatrutide, for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's the combination of the three versus the one, or for what, but you didn't, yeah, when you're taking the higher doses, the 2 milligrams a week, where yeah, it crushed your hunger drive, but you didn't experience the same, like the depression, the same negative side effects in the same way.
Not with that, no. And it could be just because I'm more used to it, whatever. There's a there's another thing too that we were trying to determine, like how long do you have to wait in between dosages or cycles of this before you completely reset where 2 milligrams feels like it did the first time. And I don't know the answer to that yet. I just haven't taken enough time off to really figure that out because I've been experimenting with the different types of stuff, and I've been experimenting with how low I can go a week and still get that benefit of having a little bit of curbed appetite. And so I've been running even really low dose for quite a long time just to see what that looks like and figure it out. I guess the real question would be, but if you're going to cycle it like that, if you're going to wait until you're completely reset and then crush yourself with 2 milligrams again, that kind of tells me that when you used them the first time, you didn't stay with your new lifestyle and you put a bunch of fat back on, which, we don't want to fucking do.
Yeah, before I get into my next follow-up questions, probably should have led with this, but anybody watching, listening, like we're not doctors. We're just two dudes here on the internet talking, sharing whatever. Yeah, right. So make sure you're consulting your health professional, consulting your doctor, just a quick YouTube disclaimer there. Okay, so then from my understanding is that Retatrutide specifically has also not just from reduces hunger drive, but also has some other positive benefits that we're starting to see. I think you've talked about, I've heard you talk about like improve like kidney function. And, so I mean, what are maybe some of the other, you know, because of course everything's got effects and some of those effects might be negative,
Yeah.
but then there can be some positive. So what are some of the other positive effects outside of just reduced appetite that you've been seeing?
Yeah, some of the in the bodybuilding circles, they're touting it improves liver health and kidney health, and one of the ways that it improves liver health is it gets rid of the fat around your liver. I know everybody's heard of fatty acid liver disease, and a lot of people in America have it. You don't have to be fat to have it, and it supposedly helps get rid of that. If you get rid of that, then you have a more healthy liver. I didn't really dive deep into the mechanism of improved kidney health, but that's supposed to be one of the claims of Retatrutide. And if you know anything about bodybuilding, bodybuilders are putting a heavy load on their kidneys, and that's one of the things that actually you see most ex bodybuilders will have failed kidneys and need new kidneys. And so from that aspect, it's been super promising. Um, all these GLP-1s reduce relative risk of heart attack by 21%, which doesn't mean a lot. It's a relative risk, but I know quite a few cardiologists that will throw that into the mix and are having great results. As far as how it affects atherosclerosis in combination with other drugs, but it's part of the trio that they're prescribing. And so, I don't know if that's a function of you reducing body fat and being healthier, or if it's a separate mechanism. I'm not really sure, but guys, one of the most unhealthy states that you can be in is have a high amount of body fat. We've talked about this many times before, but when you're obese or when if you're a guy and you're about 20% body fat, man, it's fucking with your hormones. It's definitely not good on your cardiovascular system and everything else. And your body just doesn't work as well. It doesn't process foods as efficiently. It doesn't process drugs and supplements or anything as efficiently. And the disruption of the hormones is fucking catastrophic. When you have a higher amount of body fat, you're leaning towards more estrogen dominance as a male, and that's not good. um, so overall, I mean, if you're going to use one of these types of drugs to reduce your body fat to something healthy like 15 or under, I'd say 12, and you can maintain there and stay there, it's not very hard to do. It's hard to stay at 7. It's hard to stay at 6. It's very hard to stay at 5. It's fucking soul crushing for me. It's a lot of work, but for most people to stay under 15, 12 to 15, it's not that much work. And if you can use something like this to get down there and maybe then, to try to help you maintain it in some fashion, I think that's a positive net benefit.
So then, how like with TRT, like there's a half life, like if we're talking like testosterone cypionate, I think it's like
Yeah.
what, 3.5 days. So you want to, at a minimum, do like a Monday and Thursday. I know
Yeah.
you and I both like to microdose it where it's doing daily. It, is there like, can you just, is it like once a week or, is it more recommended to do multiple a week with this? Is there a half life to it?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different strategies going on. If you're taking the larger dose, I think the once a week works pretty well. However, for me, trying to find that lowest dose possible and maintaining just enough to curb appetite, it's multiple times a week, usually twice a week. And it's such a low dose at relative to my tolerance level. I think you're having to dose twice a week on it. And there's quite a few other guys that are kind of experimenting the way I am, and that seems to be the general consensus. Lighter doses throughout the week, just kind of a top it off midweek or end of the week type thing. Um, and I mean, certainly you could try that with a larger dose, but when you take 2 milligrams for the first time, um, your appetite, you're just crushed for a week. So you don't really need to. It's super effective. But yeah, I would, if you're going to try to experiment and find, just the gold, like the Goldilocks zone of where you're getting some benefit, some hunger benefit, and it's not disrupting anything else. I think the strategy of dosing multiple times a week is probably the best one.
So like if you're not taking the regular starting dose of 2 milligrams, let's say you're cutting that half milligram, you're just doing like half of that like on a Monday, half of that on a Thursday, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and it's all over too. People have different, they react different to building a tolerance up, and some are more tolerant, less tolerant, and yeah, if it the deal with these drugs and any drugs, anabolics, anything is you want to take as little as possible to get the desired result. And so if you're going to experiment with stuff like that, I always recommend you start out not with a 2 milligram dose, but with like 1.5. And then if you don't feel anything, you could dose a smaller dose at the end of the week. But I hate it when somebody, like what I did, I didn't need 2 milligrams that first dose. That wiped me out. And it just kept getting worse. So I probably would have done better with starting with 1 milligram and 1.5, and then seeing what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, this is probably a stupid question, but I'm going to ask because I'm going to experiment it with myself. So is this something that, once you get it, you then add the water, keep
Yep.
in the fridge?
Yep. Yep. So what I do, most of these come in 10 milligram bottles. And so just to make the math easy, you would reconstitute it with 100 IUs or 1 milliliter, 1 ml of saline solution or bactosteric water. And so if you do that, if you look on the insulin syringe, there's 100 units. If you put 100 units of water in there, then every tenth or every 10 units you pull out is half a milligram. So then, 10, so 20 on the insulin syringe would be 2 milligrams. So every 10 I use is a milligram, basically, when you
Okay.
reconstitute it that way. So it keeps it pretty easy for math.
And then is this like, insulin or like where you're like
Yeah.
just you're doing it in the fat?
Yep. Yep. Just like you would most other peptides, use a really small insulin needle and then just do it sub Q. Yep. And it's non-irritating. I've never had an issue with this. Some of the stuff that you do sub Q hurts, and if you do oil sub Q, I hate that. It kind of doesn't work too well on me. So yeah, it's just like vitamin B12 or glutathione, one of those.
Okay. Any other kind of like I don't know, beware of this, look into this. I mean, any kind of last ending, thoughts with your experiments here with this that you think is important for those of us to know?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go on that full dose, you're probably going to experience some heartburn. So be ready to deal with that. With either drinking baking soda, Alka-Seltzer, maybe Tums, something like that. The last thing you want to do is have heartburn at night when you're sleeping, because what that really is that's acid eroding your esophageal lining. And it takes your body a long time, not a long time, but it takes your body resources to heal that, and it's not good. You don't want to fuck that up. So try not to go to sleep with heartburn. And one of the ways that you can mitigate that is eat a little bit earlier, do your 5 or 10 minute walk after your meal, and or switch out that last meal for liquid nutrition like a protein shake and a piece of fruit, something really easy to get through. um, that's probably the biggest side effect. Obviously you want to stay hydrated, because when you feel a lot of people, when you feel like don't want to drink it all, I mean, sorry, when you feel like you don't want to eat it all, it's kind of a chore to drink too. It kind of shuts that off too. So make sure that you're pounding the liquids. Definitely add some electrolytes to it, especially if you're not eating enough and you're relying on that kind of gift that Retatrutide has. It's giving you energy from your body fat. You definitely need to stay hydrated. So hydration's key in that, as always. And then, again, man, I can't emphasize this enough, but the real gift of these drugs is taking the hunger away. And if you take hunger away, you don't feel like eating, don't fucking just eat crap and cookies, man. Take that time to build your habits and eat the foods that you're supposed to eat. And it's real easy. You can do it a veggie, like a veggie egg white omelet for breakfast and some fruit. Lunch could be 7 ounces of meat and a salad. I mean, just anything like that. It's super easy to do, super easy to prep. And even though you don't feel like eating, you're building habits like that and you're giving your body the actual nutrients it needs so you get a better result out of it. Don't be like these 90% of the people that go on it. They're like, well, I just had a personal pizza for dinner. That's all I ate today. Like,
Oh,
what,
yeah.
what are we doing? You're going to end up skinny fat. You're going to go off the drugs. Whenever you do, and you're going to fucking rebound even worse. So, those are the big pitfalls.
Now I know that you've been experimenting with being on this kind of longer term, but like for most, I mean, is it kind of like I don't know, 90 days on, 90 days off, 2 months on, 2 months off?
Yeah, I guess it really depends where you start from. Like the client that I told you about in the beginning, he legitimately had 200 pounds of fat to lose. And so I was thinking, to give him enough runway to do that, however long that took. And I wanted to make damn sure that we had those new habits pounded in his brain, so it was a 4.5 week, 5 month journey, and he lost the majority of the weight that he wanted to. And at that point, from what I could tell and from what he told me, we have 4 months of 16 weeks of him eating the exact same things, the same types of foods, right around the same caloric intake every day, the walks after meals. And so that 4 months of that, 4.5 months of that, again, if you want to, you have a real shot at making that your new lifestyle, instead of bouncing back into God knows what. And so for two things, right? I would figure out how much body fat you want to lose and how long it's going to take you, if needed, to be habitual about this new way of eating, because it's probably a new way of eating for you. Right? Or maybe you've done it before, but just not in the habit anymore, whatever the excuse is. um, I would take how much body fat you want to lose, kind of figure out that, and what am I going to do when I get to this marker or this mark? Am I going to go off, and what does that look like? And has that been enough time for me to build this new kind of habitual style up of eating? Because when the hunger comes back, it comes fucking back.
Yeah.
There's a few days where it's back, but then you get past that and you just follow what you've been doing for the last 4 months, then you're good. And it has some real effects that way. So I would, depends on where you're starting at and what you want to end up with. But um, these the majority of the people, they lose 10, 20, 30 pounds, and they go off of it and it comes right back on because they just go back to eating what they did. And
Yeah.
so, it's a real missed opportunity in my opinion.
Yeah, and I was kind of shocked about how inexpensive it is.
From a research company.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, man, which is really a shame. Even if you go through some of these newer companies, the telemedicine, and they get it from a compounding pharmacy or something, you're still looking at $500 to $700 or more a month, which is fucking crazy. And geez, if you get it approved through your insurance, that's like, the insurance is paying $4,000 a month for it. So it's pretty crazy. But as always, you can get stuff on the black market, you know,
Yep.
if you so dare, you know.
Yep. Have you
Yeah.
noticed any differences like with your training, like how you feel when you're training?
Yeah, it comes down to on the Retatrutide, I had enough energy even on the days that I didn't really eat enough when I was really hammering on it. But again, I'm so habitual. I'm drinking my intra workout drink, even if I train fasted, right? I'm still drinking aminos and carbs during the workout. That's non-negotiable. And then even if my hunger doesn't spike after the workout, I know I'm going to come home and eat 50, 60 grams of protein. And then, by the end of the day, oh man, I didn't really eat a lot today. So I still have 80 grams of protein I'm going to eat. And then I'm going to eat a bunch of fruit to try to, get some carbs in me. And, if I actually ate enough during the day, like that, then I didn't really suffer the training wasn't suffering very much. But on the days where I just forgot or didn't get in enough food, awful. And then at the end of the long run of a pretty significant dose of retatrutide, it just got to the point where I couldn't reglycogenate, and so I was completely flat as a pancake. And I'd have 900,000 calorie, 1,000 carb days where it just wasn't filling up. And so, I I got a million tricks, man. So then, I used some exogenous insulin to try to reglycogenate, and that worked. But then, now you're throwing more drugs into this whole mix. So then to keep, for me to stay on that epic dose of retatrutide and try to get even lower body fat, then I'm having to use insulin to reglycogenate. I'm back to where I was in fucking late 90s, full on bodybuilding cycles, and throwing 18 drugs in my body. So I was like, all right, man, let's back off.
Yeah.
But that being said, about 2 weeks after being off the Retatrutide, then whatever it was, whatever insulin pathway or whatever it was interfering with, then I was able to glycogenate efficiently again, like I would expect. And that to me is a major, that's a major dilemma when I'm trying to train. As if you, I can't train flat like that, and I don't think it's good. I think you just burn through muscle at that point. So yeah, again, super powerful tool, man. If you use it wrong, it's powerful. If you use it right, it's powerful. So either way, two-edged sword.
Yep. Yep. 100%. All right, you guys. Well, again, we are not doctors. Make sure to go check with your medical professional. We're just two dudes here talking on the internet. And make sure also that you check out Forge Life, FORJLIFE.com. Snag our nootropic. Promise you won't be disappointed. As always, Jim, man, this has been awesome jamming with you, brother.
Yeah, I'm glad we get the story out for you who were so brave to venture into that. But yeah, it's always great jamming with you, man.
Yep, 100%. All right, those that watch and listen, truly appreciate you guys. Keep crushing it, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.